Hello, everyone. It's Ben with UpDoc, and we are very excited to unveil the inaugural release of the Corporate Quality Index. In case you're new to the CQI, this is really the convergence point for three primary industry reports we release here at UpDoc. The Job Market Pulse, which is our salary norms report, the Practice Management Report, which comes from the point of view of the healthcare business manager, decision maker, and the Talent Acquisition Report, which comes from the candidate coming out of the job market, expressing their interests and desires of their future employer. Now, this report is a big one, and this video will reflect that. So we're going to break it down like this. We're going to dive straight into the bottom line key talking points, and then go into some discussion with a lot of the details that we gleaned from this initial report. And yes, the Corporate Quality Index is that report that will name by brand the good, the bad, and the needs improvement employers. So what is the Corporate Quality Index? It's an anonymous survey that asks the workforce to rate their employer based on three primary categories. First, the organization and its compensation package. Second, the employer as an organization of excellence. And finally, the employer as a recommendable purveyor of its respective goods and services to the general consumer. For this inaugural release, we're only going to talk about the first two categories. And specifically, there are four questions we asked respondents to address on the compensation side: the salary, the benefits, the work-life balance, and the workplace culture. And on the flip side, on organizational excellence, we asked respondents to gauge their employers based on the employer's ability to properly manage mediocrity, based on its willingness or empowerment of ownership mindset in the workforce at large, and then finally, on the individual respondents' intention to stay in the next 12 months. The responses, the results, and the statistics are honestly staggering. Talking point number one, let's talk about the money. It's not bad. It was actually surprising. We expected salary and benefits, the tangible aspects of compensation, to be not the best scores in this index, but it actually wasn't the worst. It's almost as if the workforce sees the pay as, well, it's good enough or it's not so bad. It is what it is, and maybe that's good enough. We're not sure yet. We need more data. But one thing is very much clear is that the pay itself has more variability than the benefits, which is kind of ironic because benefits between one corporation or company to the other tends to be very variable. On the flip side, regarding work-life balance and workplace culture, this is where things started to kind of unravel and concerns started to present themselves, with work-life balance and culture not exactly scoring well, with majority of respondents, over 50% of them, saying that they can't really recommend their employer based on either of these items. The second talking point is tenure to turnover. We covered this in the end of year 2020 practice management report, and this one was a little bit alarming as well. Originally, we saw estimates about 40% of the workforce was pretty much ready to leave their work yesterday. But now that we ran the full report for this initial release, it's actually 56.6%. So let me say that one more time. 56% of your workforce is ready to leave you in the next 12 months. The next thing we need to talk about is ownership mindset. In the 2020 end of year practice management report, probably the most common complaint from manager narratives was that they felt the line staff was kind of self-imposing micromanagement many times. In fact, there was actually written out narratives of, I wish my staff would just figure this stuff out on their own. I want them to. I need them to. I don't want them to bug me for some of these daily operational problems. And this would be wonderful if it carried over. Unfortunately, the workforce doesn't see it the same way. In fact, only 13% of the workforce feels like they are actually empowered and encouraged by their employer organization to take on an ownership mindset in their daily roles. All right, this one's a big one. Tolerance to mediocrity. This is a term that we're adopting, and in the survey, we actually asked it in a different way of how your organization is able to or willing to manage out mediocrity, expose it, discover it, coach it up, or ultimately weed it out. Unfortunately, 75% of the workforce feels like they cannot recommend their employer based on their ability to weed out mediocrity. And the final talking point really dives into this tolerance to mediocrity idea. The concept that because mediocrity exists, it sucks up like a vacuum the ability to be excellent, the ability to innovate, the ability to entertain and to flesh out new ideas and new systems of improvement. We dive in deep in this report, and there's so much trickle down effect that can really affect a workforce for generations of its own respective career life cycles. It cannot be understated how important this is. We have to remember that in healthcare, patients' lives are literally on the line. And when 75% of your colleagues feel that mediocrity is just allowed to exist, if not rewarded to exist, that's people getting hurt. That's not just not good enough. That's wrong, and we need to fix this problem. Now, if you're interested in just diving straight into the report, go ahead and sign up for it. You'll get an automatic download, and everything is listed there, including what a lot of people are looking forward to, which is the named, we're calling it brandishes, the brands out there that were named and listed, which over 80% of respondents were very happy to anonymously name their employer. So it's all in there. We try our very best to merge these brands by location just out of respect and maybe a little bit of safeguarding for the respondent and those brands. We don't necessarily want undue pressure to come across, say, a local or regional manager because of one disgruntled employee. But at the same time, we want to be able to create a little bit more space transparency in terms of organizational excellence in our industry at large of how the workforce feels we're doing corporately. All right, so on to the details of discussion. Let's talk about the compensation package, salary and benefits. We really were surprised by this. In fact, it's probably best described as neutrally satisfied. The workforce is neutrally satisfied with their compensation package, at least in terms of the tangible elements, the salary and the benefits. It's kind of like the salary is what it is. It's not so much as sending us to the poorhouse. We definitely could be paid better. And we expected that kind of ambiance that, well, if you're going to ask me about pay, somebody could always pay me better. But it wasn't so much that as more of just a, well, I wish they could pay me better. And same with the benefits. The benefits was very consistently generally satisfied. Now, I don't want to give the wrong impression that everybody was happy. Actually, only just over 30% of respondents found their benefits package favorable and a larger chunk neutral, but it was actually the highest scoring element of the corporate quality index. Now, for the intangible elements of the compensation package, the work-life balance and the workplace culture, only about 30% of respondents felt that they could rate their employer as a favorable place to be based on those two items. And as much as that's kind of nice that it wasn't super negative, you find a little bit of conflict between the fact that over 56% of the workforce is ready to leave their employer. And we know that people stay based on culture. They say yes to the pay, but they stay for the culture. And that's leading back into a theme that we talked about in the end of year 2020 practice management report, which is workforce retention. And we see very clearly, based on the conservative estimates, that any clinician turnover will cost anywhere between 30 to 50% of their annual salary just to replace, loss of productivity. Patients can't be seen. You have to bring in temporary staff. That's a lot more expensive. The manager or hiring recruiter is going to have to spend time doing that, digging around, going through interviews and all that stuff, and then finally onboarding. We can't see this any further as an acceptable cost of doing business. So we would like to impart on you this phrase and this idea and hopefully embed it into our professional culture. We need to see workforce development as a business priority. So here's the phrase: to retain is to gain. The next topic of discussion is ownership mindset. Ownership mindset is something that's been identified regularly in our talent acquisition reports as something that a job candidate really wants to have. They want to be able to embody excellence in their work. They want to be able to grow into and upward into an organization and take it all on. They want to be given responsibilities, and they are happy to fulfill them with excellence given the right resources. We also see that the practice manager and all levels of decision makers want this across their organization. But there's definitely a disconnect when nearly 78% of the workforce feels that they cannot recommend their organization based on this factor. There's something wrong, whether it's a policies and procedures issue, maybe it's an organizational culture issue, perhaps it's just a plain miscommunication. Something needs to be made over to bridge this gap. This leads us right back into managing for mediocrity, or the organization's tolerance to mediocrity. There was some input on past reports on the talent side that kind of expressed, hey, I did what you wanted me to do and I got in trouble for it. And that's kind of reflecting as well on the practice management side in our most recent release, where managers saying, look, I need you to do these things and I need you to rise to the occasion. And maybe what we're missing is a detractor, a catalyst of mediocrity. The truth is that this item scored the worst across the entire CQI. In fact, it had the largest distribution for people that scored 3 out of 10 and under. With more data, we are hopeful we can validate this theory we have based on CQI numbers. And it's that the tolerance to mediocrity in an organization will dictate its overall business success or overall resource waste. And this is really based on some of the narrative input we've had over the years of collecting all these industry report data points, that many times 1 or 2 rogue employees or rogue managers can really poison the water. And you can see this from a career life cycle standpoint, where you might have someone in middle management that's been in that role forever. They're not so bad that you need to fire them, but they're not exactly good. And what ends up happening is you have a backlog of talent. You have talented line staff that are very worthy of promotion, but they won't get promoted because those above them are being procedurally blocked by a glass ceiling based on the mediocre middle manager. And the same will happen to a highly tenured, highly experienced line staff that might benefit from some renewed skills competencies. We mention skills competencies because most organizations don't check for this in healthcare. It's typically an annual performance appraisal based on minimal HR requirements where the employee has generally played nice in the playground, not necessarily checking for clinical expertise. And once again, we're talking about tolerance to mediocrity, where patients' lives are literally at stake. And we can't allow ourselves to just let it be. It has to be addressed. Now, if you're watching this video or perusing the report and you're thinking to yourself, wow, and you're a decision maker, then yeah, this should raise some huge alarms and red flags, that there are some hidden things going on, that there are definitely people coasting on by. And this is mostly congruent, maybe accentuated from the workforce's perspective, as the 2020 end of year practice management report respondents were saying. They were kind of okay. They were in slight agreement to neutral, that they had the tools and processes to discover and performance out mediocrity. So this is something that we really need to address as a profession. There's one more point on this as well. Now, part of what we do at UpDoc is executive consulting, and we see a lot of these leaders in healthcare business. They take a look sometimes, and every once in a while they kind of go, how did we get here? It certainly wasn't under their tenure. They're looking at the history, and they're wondering what were the contributing aspects to get to some of these low points. And I think the CQI sheds a fairly insightful light on it, which is that it's not so much that tolerance to mediocrity is this intentional aspect, like we want to be bad, we want to be bad at what we do. That's none of that truly exists that we've ever seen, but rather mediocrity, by the fact that it's allowed to exist, then is rewarded. And that is how people coast on by. That is how the employee or the tenured staff member, or perhaps the middle manager that's just been in that role for years and years and years, they are allowed to stagnate the entire system because things haven't been so bad to remove them, but they weren't exactly good either. And again, that trickle down effect of innovation that is then stymied, or even losing top talent, just becomes a vicious cycle. All right, finally, some good news. Yes, I know a bunch of that was quite the downer. And really, we feel at UpDoc it's our job to report these industry insights in the most factual light possible. And yeah, the initial release of the Corporate Quality Index shows a lot of room for improvement, but there is what we consider to be a wonderful silver lining, and that is culture. We know culture is the crux of what makes an organization good and or bad, and that objective measures can only go so far. There are so many human-driven intangibles that really lead to business success or business stagnancy. And what we have seen in the CQI is that culture is indeed measurable. Now, finally, a piece of good news. Yes, that was kind of negative, and we're not accustomed at UpDoc. We like to see the positive because we like to see growth. But we also feel it's incumbent on us to report the facts. And some of those things are just areas that our profession and overall industry needs to improve upon. But the silver lining here is culture. We saw that on the organizational excellence items of the CQI, that it in effect measures culture. And if you can measure something, then you can measure change. And you can plot a course, not just from here to here, but from somewhere that you may not want to be to a place that is absolutely fantastic. And we feel that we have that ability as a profession to make that happen. So what are the steps? Based on the CQI data, there are 3 initial strategic initiatives that you can undertake moving into 2021 that will improve your workplace culture. And the first is give your workforce a voice. Giving your workforce a voice isn't just having them air their grievances. It's really taking on their input and putting on action steps that are held accountable for at the line staff level, at the supervisorial level, and up all the way through executive leadership. And it's also empowering those at line staff that give those ideas to be recognized for both their success and failures in these initiatives for better cultural improvement. The second way you can improve your workplace culture is stop rewarding mediocrity. Perhaps find some ways, and again, take input from your workforce on ways that you can address mediocrity beyond the obligatory annual performance appraisal that obviously doesn't do that well. Because if it did, we wouldn't see such incredibly low numbers in terms of the organization's ability to manage mediocrity. There has to be other metrics, meaningful management levers to address this. Now, if you're interested in hearing more about this, please stay tuned. UpDoc has been working very, very hard on a system and solution for this on the performance management side. But honestly, it does start with listening to your people. Finally, an initiative that you can move into 2021 with in terms of improving your workplace culture is putting a premium on tenure to turnover. Again, to retain is to gain. And you're not going to keep everybody. There's kind of this overarching industry agnostic statistic of 20 to 30% turnover annual. And typically in healthcare, it's with mass exoduses. Like one key line staff member will leave and then a whole bunch will follow with them. And if we see 56% of the workforce respond and saying, hey, I'm ready to leave yesterday, it'll be really important to sit down with your workforce and say, hey, we value you. We value your ideas, your input, and your very presence that makes this place better. Help us help you feel that this place is a much more meaningful place to do my work and find rewarding career paths. And finally, here at UpDoc, we want to invite you, if you're watching this or digging into the report and you sit on the side of a decision maker, you're maybe a clinic director or perhaps a corporate executive, we want to invite you to just take a look at the numbers. Take a look at numbers for what it is, and your brand might very well be listed. And if you look at the scores and you're happy with them, or maybe you're a little bit of concern, we're here to dialogue with you with the ideas and action steps that you need to take to bring that up. And for that, we also are big in our own way to recognize and reward excellence. So in this report, we have named the top 20 CQI marks by brand. The Job Market Pulse, our initial report at UpDoc, the thing that started it all, our vision there was to create wage literacy and wage transparency throughout the job market, both for the employer as well as the prospective employee. And for the CQI, our vision here is to create some cultural transparency and to instill organizational excellence throughout the entire profession. The job market is already asking about working conditions beyond salary. It's one of the most common threads that you'll see in social media, and it's one of the most common queries we get privately here at UpDoc. And it would behoove any employer organization to make these more transparent to their current workforce as well as future applicants. Based on these initial results, we envision that organizations that take workforce development and organizational excellence as a forefront business initiative into 2021 will find an incredible blue ocean of growth and innovation. And we look forward to seeing that success. So thanks for joining us here at UpDoc with this inaugural release of the Corporate Quality Index. We're really looking forward to more contributions and fleshing out this data pool the same way we have for the salary norms at the Job Market Pulse and the same way we've gathered your narrative inputs at the Talent Acquisition Report and the Practice Management Report. We are so thrilled to see the potential of this truly come to pass. Again, this has been a cornerstone report, 5 years plus in the making. So thank you so much, especially for you contributors, for trusting us with this information and trusting that we would disseminate it in the most factual and equitable way possible. So that's it for the inaugural release of the Corporate Quality Index. I'm Ben Fung with UpDoc, and I will see you at the next one.